Hi there, thanks for joining. Let's paint this seagull. First we start with a sketch. I take a regular HB pencil because when you take a softer pencil the graphite will contaminate the paint too much maybe. The horizon line is about this height, you see. When you want to draw a straight line you can do it like this with the wrist. But you could also say I just grab the pencil like this and I let my arm do the work like this, and then chances are that you get quite a straight line. I'll draw it a little bit darker because maybe you can't see it on camera, so like this. And now let's draw the seagull. I just start somewhere with this part of the wing, I guess, and I just do the rough outlines. So this kind of form is a little bit like this, but I don't go into details much now. First I want to determine how big the seagull gets on my canvas. Maybe if I make a mistake and I make him too big, I want to correct that, and in the sketching phase I can easily do that, but later on when I've started painting it is more difficult to change that, of course. So here we get the head, the beak. I just indicate these parts slightly. So there we go. And from here on we go like this. It's more a form like this. Well, maybe I've drawn them a little bit too big, but I don't think it's that bad. So this is this wing. Then we go over here. You see, and I draw the outline of the total form. So this whole form, maybe this needs to be a little bit longer, I guess. So I'm checking the proportions. My seagull is getting a little bit bigger than on the photograph, but I don't mind that. I like it. So there we go like this. Here is it, the wing going like this. Then this can be a little bit smaller, and here this goes more like this. Okay, then here we get that other wing. So the dimensions of the seagull are reasonably okay, I think. So again, here I look for instance at this beak that goes here downward and then it goes a little bit like this, and that gets very pointy. But then here we have that other wing at the back side, and I just draw it in globally. So there we go, this wing, and then we go like this, I guess. Yes, I guess that's not that bad. It's quite big compared to the photograph, but I like it. Then I'm gonna go more detailed. I'm gonna correct mistakes. At this phase, it's easy to correct mistakes in the sketching phase. So I just want to indicate this dark part of his beak, because that gives me some landmarks. Well, here everything is more dark, that's shadow part, and then we get this form and this, and there it goes like this. Then here, of course, we get this and this. I keep it fairly simple yet, and then we go the feathers. Well, we can indicate them a little bit. Not gonna draw every feather. Here I can make a slight indication of that division of the darker part and the lighter part in his wing. So there. And here I see something like this. And here we get all these separate wings. Here they are a little bit more important. But well, let's keep it a little bit globally. Like that. Oh, the eye, of course, I almost forgot. This whole part here is rather dark. Just look at this line that's heading over there. So here I see an eyelid. Well, and this is all quite dark. I'll leave it a little bit like this. We can always do that with paint later on, of course. So now I get to this wing. I see a form like this. Here it's more edgy. Then it goes like this. Here is the slightly darker part. And then I see a form going like this. And then again we have a slightly darker part here as well. And now I'm gonna drop in some of these feathers again. Yep. And the rest we'll do with paint. And I'm gonna take some cyan, but that's a light form of phthalo blue, so you could also use phthalo blue with a little bit of white. You see? Then I also need a little bit of white, or actually quite a lot. And I'll also put some ultramarine on my palette. And some burnt umber. I'm gonna use a little bit of black as well, because we always must be careful to use pure black, but sometimes you can use it as a shortcut. And now I need a little bit of yellow as well, a tiny amount, and a tiny amount of red. So I'll grab some pyrrol red. There we go. I'm quickly gonna mix a lot of paint for the sky color. And you see that my cyan, and it may vary with every brand, but my cyan is too dark, and I guess, usually the case, that it's also too vivid. So let's grab a little bit of cyan over here and make it lighter with white. And again, I mix this with my palette knife, because this way I can mix a pile of paint and I can dip my brush into this pile of paint. And when I would mix it with a brush, all the paint would disappear in the bristles of the brush. Now you see, the tonal value is quite alright. It doesn't have to be that precise either, by the way. But you see that my blue is a little bit too vivid. And to make it a little bit more dull, I'll use a little bit of pyrrol red. Red is a little bit the opposite color of cyan. And when you mix opposite colors, colors that lie opposite of each other on the color wheel, then you can dull colors down. So there you go, we're getting close. It can use still a little bit even more. So that's always funny. The photograph looks rather colorful with the blue colors, but look at this, how dull this color in reality is when you see it on the palette. It's still even a little bit too vivid, so I'll add even more red. You see, this is rather good. And now that we're at it, at mixing, I go on to mix the color of the sea as well. So again, I grab a little bit of cyan, or a little bit, quite a lot actually. Now, and this is a darker color, so I compare, and the tonal value is reasonably close. It could use a little bit of white to make it slightly lighter. So when you mix colors, you look at three things. First thing is, what kind of color is it? And it's a kind of a blue color. It leans a little bit towards gray and green. but the base is kind of a blue color, so that's why I start with blue. Then I also look at the tonal value, how dark or light the color is. And the last thing is the saturation, how vivid my color is compared to that color. Now you see that tonal value is reasonably okay, it could be better, but I have to add red again to make that color less vivid. And what happens then is that it as well also gets more gray. Oh, maybe I've added too much. Well, it could be quite alright. Well, I've added a little bit too much. So I wasn't careful enough. I've added too much of the red. Now it's a little bit too gray. So I just put a little bit of this aside. And I add more of the cyan again. If I would have left it over there, then I would have needed a lot more of cyan. And this way, by splitting it, I need less cyan to drop it in another direction. Now it's less vivid and it's also quite of the right tonal value, but now it's lacking another color, and that is in this case yellow. I do a tiny amount. Compare, yeah, there we go. And the funny thing is, when your color is about the same tonal value as the source color, and when the color is quite grayish, then it's easy most of the times to see what's missing, what the color lacks. Well, this is quite alright, I keep it like that. And then you see that at some spots it gets a little bit lighter. Therefore I'm gonna grab a little bit of white and mix that here a little bit. I grab something of this little mixture that I just screwed up a little bit. I get a lighter mixture. So this is cyan with red, too much red in fact. And I make it lighter with a little bit of titanium white. You see me do this, I compare it a little bit with the color that I see here in the foreground. It's kind of like this color. Then we have a very light color here for the waves in the front, for the foam on the waves. So I'll grab a little bit of white, quite a lot of white, but is it as white as the paper? No, you see, this is reasonably dark, this white. It is not as white as the edge of my paper. So the edge of the paper is always handy, because when we wouldn't have that, we could have thought, oh, this is white, I just drop in some white, but in reality it's reasonably dark. So I add again a little bit of that gray mixture that I made, that I accidentally made. So a little bit of cyan, a little bit of white and a little bit of red. And then I compare and I say, okay, for most parts this isn't that bad. So I'll keep it, I'll drop it over here. And then of course there are even some lighter parts, so I'll add a little bit more white to that same mixture that I had. You see there, and there I see a little bit more of red. It has more bit of red feel to it, so I'll add a slight touch of red to the lightest white that I'm gonna make. You see, that's reasonably okay for that part. So can keep that as well. So now we have some colors that we can work with. So finally we can start painting. And I grab a reasonable big brush and a smaller one, because when I want to go around the feathers I need a smaller one. And I use angled brushes because I paint at a strange angle, because I'm demonstrating it for the camera. Usually I would stand in front of my painting and I would use a flat brush in this instance. So I recommend using a flat brush for these large planes. But now I use an angled brush, so that is why. I begin with the sky, so I just grab that sky color and I drop it in. And I just push the paint around the edge of the sketch of the seagull, like this. Oh, I had a little bit too much paint there. So there we go. And then I wipe it out. But things like this, you don't have to worry too much about it. You can wipe it away a little bit. But on the other hand, acrylics dry really flat. So you won't keep that ridge after all. So that's a difference, for instance, with oil paints. Acrylics tend to dry quite flat. And if you don't want to dry, to have it drying flat, there are gels and mediums that you can use to make your paint thicker, if you like that effect of, yeah, relief in your paints. Now I'm quickly gonna do a little bit with the smaller brush in between these feathers, so like this, but I'm not gonna do it too precise, but just to put in some of the sky color around that, so there. And with this one as well, just at the spots where I know that it's difficult to do that with the big brush. So a little bit like this. If I destroy a little bit too much of the seagull, I can always repair that, because the seagull I can paint on top of my sky. Then I quickly go to the big brush again. And I do the rest, the things that don't need to be too precise. Now we get to the horizon line. And let me first draw in the horizon line. I do my brush perpendicular to the canvas and I just draw the straight line out of my shoulder. So I do my whole arm like this. Then it's rather easy to make straight lines. And we're gonna do something with that line shortly, because when you look to the photograph, you see that the horizon line isn't a so-called hard line, because it's far away and the focus isn't of the camera isn't on that line, it is on the seagull. So that line isn't very sharp, very hard. So I quickly wipe off my brush with a paper towel. A little bit, you don't need to do too much, just that it's a little bit clean. Like this. But you see, I don't have to clean it extensively with water, etc., because I jump over to this darker color, and I with the little bit of paint that's in my brush now, it looks it is the same color family a little bit, and okay, it's a little bit lighter, but it won't affect the darker paint that much. So now I'm gonna drop in the sea, and the sea, let's take a look. We have that foam over here, and here we have it goes I guess I just drop it in up till about here, and these piles I can let them overlap later on. I can draw them later. So first let me do the big plane. That's the nice thing of acrylics, you can easily layer, and you can layer quickly. If you want to layer with oils, for instance, you have to wait for a very long time. At least if you want to layer in the same way as we're doing now with acrylics. So there we go upward, and I'm not blending the colors yet, but I just go like this. They're getting close to each other now. Now I'm gonna wipe off a little bit this excess paint on a paper towel, but I leave a little bit in the bristles. And now I mix that with the previous color, the sky color, that's still on my palette. So I get a color that is in between this dark and this lighter value. See, so like this. And then I drop that on top, in between these two colors. And again, if your brush is empty, just do it again. Fill it again, so like this. I'll do it again, a little bit of that light color, and I drop it on the edge. There you go, you see? I wipe the brush clean again, and now I do it a little bit more precise because I have a very dark color at my brush and I want to go over to the foam. So here we go, with a little bit of water. Now it's reasonably clean. Now I'm gonna start with this lighter color that I want to drop in here a little bit in the front, and I want to make a kind of transition. So I drop that color in here, you see, that lighter variation, and a little bit I'm gonna merge it, I'm gonna wipe it through the existing color, so like this. And I do it horizontally, because that looks logic in this case with the sea. You have a little bit that horizontal feel. Here again, here I do it a little bit more, because I see that in the photograph as well, and then I let it go up till here a little bit, and then here maybe here a little bit as well. So, and that's enough. You already get a little bit of that feeling of that there's a sea or an ocean or something. Now another thing I can do is this darker color. At some spots you see a little bit other colors, so I'll grab a little bit of red, I'll do that a little bit here in this mixture, and I add a little bit of yellow as well. Then we get a little bit of a kind of a grayish, green grayish color, a little bit more red. So there we go. So it's a little bit different than what we had, but the tonal value is quite the same. And I'll add that at some spots. I'll drop it in the water, make it slightly darker, and a little bit more yellow. So there we go again. Just at some spots, and you get a little bit of color variation, but not too much. Still slightly more. Slowly build it a little bit more here. See, a little bit of this, a little bit more of red there. Now let's grab a paper towel again, wipe the brush clean, and I'm gonna grab this lighter color that is a little bit this kind of foam. So I drop that in first. I don't let it touch the blue of the sea there, because I don't want to contaminate this paint. Later on I will want to mix it a little bit red and red, but at this stage I just do it like this. And when we get over here, we get lighter waves, but here, it's this, then I'm gonna use this more red color, but over here we again have a little bit of this kind of foam color, I guess. It's not that I do everything perfectly as well, because I make mistakes also as well. And now I'm gonna drop it in a little bit in the water that we already had there, so. And over here I'm gonna grab a little bit of that lighter sea color, and I mix it a little bit with that lighter color. So again, this is darker than this, and now I have a color in between these two, and then I can easily make some transitional color here in between when I wipe them together. You see? And you don't have to be too precise, because these piles will get on top of this as well, so we will hardly see this in the end. And now here, for instance, there are some spots that I want to drop in a little bit more of that blue, and I grab just the previous blue color, so like this, and again horizontal strokes, and here as well a little bit. So I do it a little bit freely. I don't look at the photograph too much in this case, Now I grab a little bit of that lighter blue color again. For here, for this part, it's a little bit darker. And then it goes a little bit like this. So there we are. And you see, and you can always easily switch between the colors. So now again I get that lighter color again. And I build my foam color more again. And the more often I go over it again, the lighter it will become. Because I will show you here, if I add a little bit extra, you see that the light, of course, builds the lighter color. And at some spots I leave it like it was. But now I grab that final, that more red kind of color, that will be a little bit more spectacular, I guess. I drop it in here because here it's rather light for a small part. So I want to darken it shortly. But here as well I'll add a little bit of that more red, white color there. So now you see that it stands out a little bit too much, but that is because we haven't connected it to the surroundings. So now I grab that more darker variation again and I wipe that in between like this. And here as well I'll connect them a little bit by making it a little bit softer in between. And then at the top here as well I make this a little bit softer blue like that. Over here, by the way, I again see some darker parts. Oh, that's a little bit too dark. I grabbed the wrong color. It's no problem. Just do like this. And but here I see that as well on top of this here. So maybe I can add that. You get the idea. I think that's enough already. I can get the smaller brush a little bit to drop in a little bit of that light and do it in the directions of the foam. So you see a little bit of these kind of motions. See? Here as well maybe, but oh, again there the piles will go on top of it. And again I can always put in some darker parts again as well if needed, if I like that. So now we head over to the Seagull, and I would like to drop in the eye first, make that rather dark, and maybe later on I make it lighter, but just grab a small round brush because that's easier for detail work. And now I just grab a little bit of black and a little bit of burnt umber. I mix them together so that I get a very dark color, but it also contains a little bit of burnt umber in this case. And if you want to paint very precisely, you can as well add a little amount of water. And now I'm going to focus on that eye, and then the part here, the darkest parts that I see. So over here, that's enough because over here it gets lighter already. And then the beak, I see a dark line coming like this. Here it gets wider. Yeah, I think it's something like this. So there you go. Now I'm gonna focus on light and dark in the Seagull itself. So let's make some space on the palette. Where is my palette knife? What kind of colors do we see? We see some big differences in light and dark. If you squint your eyes, you see that this is all very dark, reasonably dark, and this is quite light. So let us first focus on the darkest parts in the Seagull, and that is obviously here and here a little bit, and here it's already a little bit lighter. But this is the darkest part, and I think we can get there by using, for instance, burnt umber. You see that's already very close, but for this darkest part, it can use a little bit of ultramarine as well to make it a little bit darker. So I mix a little bit of ultramarine with the burnt umber, but the balance is a little bit more towards brown than towards blue, you see? So like this. The dark color, so that's over here. And I do it a little bit so feather-like, like this, in the forms of the feathers. And do it, see it at other spots? No, not really, but here is a little part where the wing turns, where it's a little bit dark as well. Now I'm gonna do this slightly lighter color. So we take a little bit of white and drop that in. Yeah, that's good, but it also looks like it's a little bit purplish, so you could also use a little bit of red, I guess. So I'm first gonna try in this small part here. Yeah, and then ever so slightly more of ultramarine as well. Like this. Yeah, okay. Then we get that slightly lighter part, but it gets more grayish, purplish. So I grab a lot of ultramarine. Mix that through this mixture. I want to have it more towards the bluish, the grayish side now, so I'll add a little bit of white, and then I can add a little bit of red as well. Well, it's quite right for some parts, you see, and here it's even more purplish. So I keep this color for these kind of parts, but here I can add a little bit more of ultramarine. Yeah, okay, so it's close to that one, but it is slightly more purplish. And now we get to the lighter parts. I'll grab a lot of white, and where shall I put it? It's a little bit full. I will put it through this mixture of the lightest wave for foam color, but there are also parts that lean a little bit towards this brown color, I would guess. So I'll also grab a little bit of this mixture, put that through that white, lighter, and check. Yeah, that's quite all right. See, so now, and I can use that color for other parts in the wings as well, I guess. So here we have that more brown color, here we have that dark color, then we get that brown color. And I'll drop it in all over this place, like that. There we go. And I just indicate some of the feathers by just making those motions. And don't mind if it is looking strange, because I hope you can see, now it's obvious that, I think, that here it looks weird as well. And that is because we don't have the context of the other colors. So don't mind that too much. I grab a little bit of this more purplish color because I see that on the side here a little bit of the wing where it turns to the light a little bit. I see that kind of color as well. So I drop it in there. And then on top, of course, it gets even lighter. Now I'm getting over to the other parts in the wings, so we get that more, yeah, this kind of color. So I'll just use that for most parts that I see. So I see a darker part in every feather, and then especially here you can see it quite good. I do it like this because the light comes through the rest of the feather. So I want to replicate that effect, of course. So, and then from here on, I will just do this. So the color is different than what we had first. See, I drop it in, and the pointy part, and the point, I drop it in like this, in the direction of the feathers. Don't forget to grab new paint when it's needed. So now I'm gonna do first the body here. So I grab that other nice, that more purple color that we made recently. I'll drop that here. For the most part, it's good. Here it may be a little bit darker, but we'll do that shortly. So let's fill in this whole part with this color first. It's no problem. We can always adjust, and the first layer of color is important because then we have something we can build on. Here as well it gets a little bit more blue, so I just grab a little bit of that blue from the sea, the darker color there, and mix it. And it's ever so slightly, but I do it. And it makes a difference. So I just look at where are dark parts, and now this line towards his beak is also kind of this kind of color. And this, you see, so there we go. And as well here with his eye, I do it like that. Okay. Well, here we can make it a little bit darker just by adding a little bit of burnt umber and ultramarine mixed together, and just mix that with what we have. And then I do it a little bit in a pattern kind of way, because I see spots on his body. I'll grab a small round brush again, and then I'm gonna head over to this color that is slightly lighter, but not the lightest light. So here, for instance, I can use that perfectly at the end of the feather, and here as well. And just drop it in next to that darker color, and that way I do it here as well. So nice. So it isn't that light, but it isn't that dark either. And here I make an in-between value, slightly darker. So for these feathers. Here, by the way, I see it's more kind of orangey, a little bit yellow. So let's mix a little bit of yellow and red in this mixture to make it a little bit more warm. So over here, see, so like that, like that. Well, not too much as well. Now to this part. Here I want to start with the lightest parts, because that's what I have on my brush at this moment. So a little bit of that orangey light color. I can see that more pronounced there, so a little bit of that. Then I will head over to the lightest color that I had, because here you see at some spots that the sun is hitting it just around the edge. So that's fairly light. I do the same with the edges of the feathers here, where I see it, like there, and here a little bit maybe. See, and here at some spots, but here it gets less. So that's enough, and now I go over to the more grayish color, this one. So, and I don't mind the color itself too much at this stage. So this is more light, this kind of color. And it goes a little bit like this, in these directions. And then it gets darker, so I grab that next color. There we go, that's a little bit similar to his body. See, so, and at some spots you see it coming through like that. Here it gets reasonably brown, so I grab a little bit more of that burnt umber for here. Reasonably brown there, and here at some spots as well. Okay, and now these darker parts on these feathers. So there is a darker part, here is slightly dark, here it is slightly dark, here it is slightly dark. So there we go. Add a little bit more of orange to our purplish mixture. So I grab this mixture, make it a little bit more towards red, orange, but it hardly contains color. It still is very desaturated color. Here is rather light, so I'll use that lighter color first here. This one is grayish light. And then we have all kinds of more brownish details. So I grab a little bit with this white still on, with this light color still on my brush. I mix it a little bit to this mixture so that I can do things like this. I drop in some texture, so to speak. And now again I grab a little bit more of that brown because here it's more pronounced. And here at this edge it really gets quite dark brownish, so I'll drop in more of that, you see, there. And here I'll keep it quite simple. I do it a little bit like this. So then we have a little bit of texture. And then again this ridge of that wing is a little bit darker. So made it a little bit too dark maybe the first time, but now I'm gonna add a second layer of burnt umber and ultramarine. For this part is reasonably dark here as well, so there we go. Now I head over to this more brown color for this part. Head over to the more grayish purplish color and look at the directions that you see of the feathers. So there we go, and then it goes a little bit like this. Here it needs a little bit more precision. So this is all kind of transparent things that you see. You see the light shines through the feathers, and these feathers overlap each other, and that's why at some spots it's darker and at some spots it's lighter. So that's a very nice play of light and dark. And so this is a little bit too light, but leave it to dry first, then we can do that in the second layer. Now I go over to this lighter color again for these lighter parts that we see. Here, for instance, here, here, here. And, well, I use the photo as reference. I'm not doing exactly what I see on the photo, but I use it as, yeah, kind of inspiration. Now I make a value in between these two to do, for instance, this part where it shines a little bit less through the wings, through the feathers. Here as well, it's a little bit less, and here as well. So this is lighter than this. Then I get this grayish purplish color for this line over there. I know in reality it's a little bit another color, but I don't care that much. And this as well, I do a little bit with this purplish color. So only where I see that it is needed, and on the top of the eyelid there's a little bit dark line. Now I'm gonna grab a slightly bigger brush again. Oh, and by the way, here I also need this more purplish color where it turns the wing. And now it's time to put in this color. It still contains a little bit of gray, it's a little bit colorful still. So, and I added here as well in his head. Here I want to make it slightly darker. So there. Now I head over to the lightest color put that in first now, because I cannot see if things are working out. And when I do this lighter color, I can start to see if it is gonna work a little bit. And now, when we drop it in, the total picture looks different. And I have to grab a smaller brush now for the more refined parts. Like here, for instance, the around here on his beak is a light part. Here it gets more grayish, but ever so slightly. So I added a slight amount of gray. And now I'm gonna let it turn with a little bit of black. I'm gonna let it turn towards black by making black and a little bit of burnt umber, sorry. And you see that value in between makes it go turning a little bit. And then the point here at the front, I do that same color. And now I add a slightly lighter touch on the tip here. But you see here at the back side, here it turns away a little bit dark like this. A little bit of that gray stuff is good for here. And now you can make these colors in between, because now I'm gonna do some details. So here, for instance, it is more light, so I do more light on this top here and a little bit here. See, so it gets a little bit more refined. By the way, I lighten that shadow a little bit here from here because of the reflected light into the shadow. But now I want to make it turn more. So I grab a lighter color, mix that to this darker color that we used, and I mix them together so I have a value in between those two colors. So now when I add that here, we will get a smoother transitions between the two. You see, so you can easily, you can make transitions wet and wet, of course, but you can also do it with layers. Okay, and now at some spots I'm gonna add a little bit of these spots. So a slightly darker color than that white. Don't exaggerate it, but just slightly darker, and then the pattern of these spots you can follow a little bit. See, like this. Then before you know it, you get the feeling of texture on that bird. And now I'm heading over here and make it even lighter, because there the difference between the white, the lightest parts, and these dots are even smaller. So I do it a little bit like this, and that is enough already. So ultramarine with burnt umber to make a dark color again here for this part, because now this is a little bit dry and now I can more easily make it cover. And because that's a little problem with ultramarine and burnt umber, you can make very nice dark colors, but it won't cover that well at first, most of the times. Same goes for here. Here I want to add a little bit more darkness. So, oh yeah, of course, here was another part where I wanted to make it slightly darker, especially where the wing turns. So there and there, but here as well it's a little bit darker. So there we go. Oh. I grab this light part that isn't white yet, so this color. For at some parts, what did I see? Oh yeah, here. In these feathers there's even more light, but ever so slightly lighter. You see, so like this, and here a small part, and here a small part. Well, I guess I would leave the bird like this. It's good enough, I guess. And now it's time for these piles. But you see, there's this burnt umber mixture. It's burnt umber with a little bit of ultramarine. I can keep that, I guess. Then I have a nice dark brown color for some parts of these piles. But there also need to be some shadow parts that are even darker, and for that I just grab some black in this case through the brown color. So I use black, but it has a shift towards brown. Yeah. Now I also need some color for the slightly lighter parts, and well, I use the same mixture again of that burnt umber and ultramarine. But if I look closely, I see that it's more orangey, that lighter color. So I'll add a little bit of red to that mixture. And a little bit of yellow, I guess. Yeah, okay. And maybe I make it slightly lighter with a little bit of white as well. Here I see in the distance a little bit, well, a little bit dark. I just grab a little bit of black and a little bit of brown. And I just indicate it here in the sea a little bit like this. Not more than that is necessary. You see, a little bit like that, and then I do that upright pile that I see there. Like this, and I want to stick it out a little bit above the horizon. Because here it stops at the horizon, about, and for the composition I like that a little bit more. Now let's grab some of this very dark mixture, that more black color, and we do the downsides a little bit of these piles here, so a little bit dark. I do it a little bit like this. And here everything gets a little bit lighter. So now I grab that lighter, that brown, and I do it a little bit like this. See? Don't spend too much time thinking, just drop them in. Some spots I leave a little space. Here I leave a little space again, but there we go again. Here they get smaller and smaller. Well, now I grab a little bit of the sea color and I mix that with that brown color. You might be thinking, what are you doing? But then they get connected a little bit with each other, so I can do it even more. So now the sea color slightly shifts towards that brown color, so the contrast here between the brown and the sea gets smaller, and therefore it looks less sharp. And that's what we want, because here you see more contrast, but here you see less contrast. So that's a little bit of a trick to do that. And now at some spots I can add some more dark. So a little bit of that more black paint. Maybe it's a little bit too much. I just add a little bit at some spots. But not too much. I don't mind too much. And a little bit of this lighter color at some spots as well. At the sides where you see light hitting these piles. But you see, I hardly do anything. It's just drop in at some spots and that's enough. But then it gets a little bit less flat. It gets a little bit more three-dimensional. But don't forget, they are a little bit in the distance, so we don't have to do that much because it's scenery. But here in front we see them better, of course. We have a little bit more detail. So now I'm just going to start to drop in these piles here. I'll do them a little bit more carefully, or carefully more, I give them a little bit more form, so to speak. And at some spots they're a little bit more close to each other, like this. You see, and at some points I let it overlap the things that we already did. Oh, that's a little bit dark, but never mind, we can always restore. So I first took the quite dark color, but now I hardly look at the photo anymore. I just look a little bit at my canvas. If you want to do very realistically, you always stick to the photograph, but I don't mind that much. Okay, I leave it to dry a little bit because now I want to drop in the lighter colors and I need some coffee. But then I'll finish the painting. Ah, I hear the coffee machine. Don't forget to take breaks because that's very important when you're painting. So, by the way, now that we're talking about coffee, if you like my videos and if you want to support me a little bit financially, then you can buy me a coffee. The link is in the description of the video. Every tiny bit helps. It's always much appreciated. It helps cover some costs, of course, because painting is expensive, as you all know. And yeah, making videos is expensive as well. So now I drop another color in, more brown, you see at some spots. So that we get some differences. You see, like this, up, up, up. But I do it consistently, so I have a dark side, there we go again, Star Wars, and a lighter side. So the darker side I already put in, and now I'm doing the lighter side. But you can hardly see it because the tonal values are very close, but that's as on the photograph as well. And that's also what makes paintings look great sometimes, these small subtle differences. Because sometimes we tend to exaggerate things too much and then it looks a little bit childish or unrealistic. Now I need to do the lightest color that I have mixed as this one, and I do that at some spots as well. So there you go, on top sometimes, maybe a little bit there, it's ever so slightly, there's not much effort at all. There we go. See, and maybe here, oh well, here we can do it as well, a little bit on top of some parts. Yeah, okay. You see, that's quite nice. The bottoms of these piles are a little bit ugly, so I'll restore that. The edges, in fact, are a little bit soft, so let's use this dark sea color to do that, you see. So again, it's the color of that sea that I'm using now to make them look more standing in the water. I don't want to exaggerate it too much, but make them a little bit more standing out like this, okay? Now you see that the more darker parts of these piles, sometimes, again, it didn't cover that well, so I'll put a second layer in it like this. If necessary, it's not always necessary, but at some spots it might be handy to do that. And now in the last phase I can always go and look, are there spots where I want to have it slightly lighter still? Well, maybe here on this foam I add a little, oops, I have a dirty brush. Oops, oops, oops. There you go again. A little bit white. Again to do this. So it gets a little bit, but I think that's the only part where I want to do that. For the rest, well, maybe here a slight part. A little bit on top of this, but not everywhere, you see, so you let that other layer do its job as well. Now I hope that was helpful, I hope you enjoyed painting, I did. Thanks for watching, see you next time.